box. Now, whenever we say the law, for me, that's the box where we place ourselves. And I'm not saying we should be lawless. I'm simply saying that if these laws were established in particular circumstances, so should it be that when the circumstances change, the laws get to change. And when you look at, the NSSF Act, I'm a lawyer, and you'll notice that there's about 5 ways in which one can get a benefit. The debate has been that in other jurisdictions, Social Security is available in many other instances which are not provided for in our law. So the same lawmakers can actually amend the laws if it is necessary. I think the debate should be around what needs to be done, because I think on the other hand, the argument has been, why should it be the only recourse? Yeah, someone has saved 3.5 million, they're getting 20% of that, which is about 700-something thousand. Is that all there is? And how much is that going to do for them? So you feel that it needs to be a broader discussion beyond just Social Security to say what more can be done, what stimulus packages can be done. And that's why this discussion is not only employment, but also business. Because we know if businesses fail, there's no work. And if there's no work, there's no payment. Yeah.
Alex, thank you very much for starting us off. Yes. And like Alex mentioned, there's going to be a number of people who will be discussing the aspects that he's introduced to us. And now we're going to invite from the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development our keynote address. It's coming right after this.
Business as usual, they shake our world, alter our thinking, and disrupt routines and established processes. What is the future of work past COVID-19? How should regulators, employers, and courts manage the disruptions related to employment relations as we know them? Join Signum Advocates as it hosts the 2nd Annual Labour and Employment Conference, televised live on NBS TV on the 31st of May 2020 between 2 to 4 p.m. under the theme Business and Employment Sustainability Amidst the COVID-19 Crisis. Proudly sponsored by Liquid Telecom, building Africa's digital future. When pandemics strike, it's rarely business as usual. They shake our world, alter our thinking, and disrupt routines and established processes. What is the future of work past COVID-19? How should regulators, employers, and courts manage the disruptions related to employment relations as we know them? Join Signum Advocates as it hosts the 2nd Annual Labour and Employment Conference, televised live on NBS TV on the 31st of May 2020 between 2 to 4 p.m. under the theme Business and Employment Sustainability Amidst the COVID-19 Crisis. Proudly sponsored by Liquid Telecom, building Africa's digital future.
Welcome back. Thank you for staying with us. This is the Labour and Employment Conference 2020 brought to you by Signum Advocates and Partners. The particular partners we're talking about here are NBS TV and Liquid Telecom. We just let go of Alex Matovu, who is one of the partners at Signum Advocates, and he did give us an introduction of why we're having this conference and what we hope to achieve from having this discussion. We're glad that you're here for this very important conversation. Now, government is a key stakeholder in labor and employment issues, and so we've been joined by Mr. Alex Asimwe. He is the Commissioner, Labour, Industrial Relations and Productivity in the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development. Alex has studied, initiated, implemented, enforced and advised on policies, laws, programs, projects and plans on labour, employment, as well as occupational safety and health. He has experience of over 15 years and a strong practical operational knowledge on job creation programs, labour productivity enhancement, social security schemes, labour inspection systems, industrial relations, including conciliation, mediation, and arbitration of labour complaints and disputes. In addition, he has demonstrated experience in skills development systems with a focus on vocational training and work-based learning, such as apprenticeship. He is also he's very familiar with handling complex regulatory systems with a growing focus on decent work systems, wise use of environment, changing work systems, and technological innovations. At this year's Labour and Employment e-conference, Mr. Alex Asimwe shall be our keynote speaker, and he's going to be tackling government's plan to curb the effects of the pandemic in Uganda's fragile labor market. Commissioner, welcome to this e-conference.
Thank you. And good afternoon, viewers.
All right.
Good afternoon to you.
Very many people have been wondering what government is doing for the workers. If you could let the participants, the viewers, know government's plan.
Thank you. I would like to thank Signam and NBS for giving us an opportunity to tell Ugandans on what the government is doing. Fellow Ugandans, you are aware that government is implementing a national health response plan on the prevention and control of this pandemic. And that implementation is led by HE, the president of this country. And the idea is that whereas we want workplaces to flourish, we want jobs to grow, we need to ensure that we are safe and healthy. And therefore, we have measures in place. In particular, the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development, we have a mandate ensuring that the working conditions are safe, but also importantly in ensuring that the productivity of workers is improved. So we have come up with standard operating procedures that are well entrenched in the Occupational Safety and Health Act of 2000 and the labor laws, particularly the Employment Act of 2006. Now, what we are doing is to undertake regular and periodic labor inspections and occupational safety and health inspections to ensure that the workplaces are not centers of transmitting this pandemic. And in that note, a circular has been issued to all labor officers in the country to ensure that they start inspecting or monitoring these workplaces. And we are also coming up with what we call an enterprise-based inspection, training and sensitization that is able to address the issues of non-compliance, but also mindset in the context of workplace. Now, in terms of ensuring safety and health of workers, government direction is in that line, and we are also in line with the national guidelines on control and prevention of this pandemic issued by the Ministry of Health. Now, on the broader level is that we need to know that government is planning to ensure that this economy is improved. You may be aware that the Minister of Finance made some statements a few days ago. But what is it that is under discussion is that we needed to capitalize the Uganda Development Bank, and that will help that Ugandans are able to access cheap and affordable credit. There are already programs, flagship programs of capital accumulation in the private sector and in the different MDAs under government. So those are able to give credit to youth groups, to women, to disabled persons with disability, so that they can participate in the labor market. In addition, having capital loan is not an end in itself. Government is seriously investing in skills development agenda. You had at the beginning of this year before COVID that we are introducing a national apprenticeship framework, and we're going to target the key sectors of the economy. Now, this is the opportunity. The opportunity is that if you've been working in a sector that is now highly affected, you can switch to another sector and you do work, but as you are working, you are earning and you are learning.
Okay.
And there is a learning outcome. And at the end of the learning period or duration, you are able to be certified and accredited. Meaning that if you are in the hotel sector, you can as well join other trade type in the construction, you learn and work. And Ugandans, we need to know that this situation calls for flexibility. Life is about flexibility. We have to cope up with the situations that are at our hand. The beauty is that the government has put the measures or mechanism in place that would prepare. Now, two things that are remaining that are important for Ugandans to know, because once you have skills, you have capital, then you need technology. Okay. Now, those three can excel or facilitate growth and development better if the fundamentals of the real economy, and the real economy is what the president talked about, the fundamentals of real economy of infrastructure, energy, roads, water, railway, defense, security, and health. Now, those three will be firm, able to help this country to take off. And as you know, this country, we have managed to invest a lot in the infrastructure. And that's why you see the opportunities that are available, the good things that we see. It is because of that, what we would call a strategic direction of this government. With that, we'll be able to defeat this COVID with the negative impacts that it is posing on many nations.
Okay. Well, you've talked about what government is planning to do in terms of the periodic inspections at places of work to ensure that there is adherence to the guidelines that have been given. That's for protection of workers. But that is in the context that people are back to work and they're actually working. Remember, there are companies that are now thinking about downsizing. Some have already probably even issued out memos of salary cuts and downsizing and all that's coming. What exactly is a government's plea to the employers? What are they going to do actually, apart from just the plea of telling employers, please do not downsize, please do not do salary cuts, and do not send away these people? What more is government going to do other than the pleas that we've heard?
One is that we needed to know that HE, the president, on 1st May, gave guidance that employees should not be terminated. And that guidance is actually in the line with the labor laws. The idea is that this pandemic is not permanent. This pandemic is temporary. But also, most importantly, the termination is more expensive, that you will occasion more costs when you terminate the workers without following other simple options that are available in the law. For instance, what workers and employers require, and we know it very well that the law is very clear, but the issue of employers and workers is more than a legal matter. So we encourage more dialogue, we encourage more consensus building, and ensure that the workers can be temporarily be off, and when the situation resumes, I mean when work resumes, these workers can come and work. And there are legal provisions that have been provided. What has been a problem is some employers are not following the procedures that and the guidance we issued. You hear people reducing salaries.
Yes, because employers, look here, Alex, it's a very good thing that the guidance that government is giving, but we want to look at the practicability, right? That this employer that you're guiding not to do salary cuts or send away people has been closed for the last about 3 months, and yet when opened or even during this period is expected to still pay me, the employee. Are you looking at the employer's side as well?
No doubt. What we are saying as government, that is there is a better way, the best process that is in line with the law, that is harmonious, that you can be able to put your workers in the context of being away from work. Now I can give you an example. If I'm working for company X and I'm earning 1 million, yes, I know that the sales have certainly reduced. So I should not in the morning find a letter telling me that your salary has been reduced to 500,000. But because the law requires that anything to do with wage calculation, interval payment, that in case you want to change, there must be an agreement before. It means that you as an employer, you need to engage me and say, look, and this is also what we would call best human development practices in the workplace. So the consensus and the harmonious and dialogue is the one that drives the agenda.
So Mr. Asimwe, can I get my employees and basically tell them, we're having a dialogue, right? For the last 3 months, we haven't made any money. Therefore, I don't have any money to pay you. So the 1 million I was supposed to give you does not exist. So for the next couple of months, I won't be able to pay you.
Absolutely, because you see, one is that...
Isn't that the same effect?
Yeah, but...
Remember, we don't even know how long we are having COVID-19 in this case.
No. At least science is telling us that this is it is temporary. We only need to manage and we get out of it.
Okay.
At least science has not informed us that we are going to be with this situation for a long time. So the idea is that you have to lay off, you have to engage your workers in line with the law. And the law says that you must have an agreement with workers in case you want to reduce their salaries. If you want them to go on what you'd call unpaid leave, there is no provisions in the law, in the Employment Act, that provides for unpaid leave.
Okay.
However, Section 23 is very clear that you can only enter into a contract of service in line with the Act. But it follows, therefore, that an employer may agree with his workers or her workers on terms and conditions of service that may not conflict with the Employment Act. So that's the law.
Okay. All right, we'll be coming to you, back to you, Mr. Alex Asimwe. We are still with you right here, but we would like to take on another keynote address coming in from Geraldine Salibusulwa, who is a Ugandan accountant and business administrator. She is also a proprietor of Regent Capital, a financial advisory consultancy. Geraldine has a wealth of financial management experience, and that's both local and global as well, cutting across different sectors ranging from government, banking, pensions, transport, retail, as well as the service industry. And she's been listening in. She has also served as a non-executive director on the board of Housing Finance Bank for the last 7 years until November 2017. She was also the deputy managing director of the National Social Security Fund, NSSF. She has over 19 years experience in managing and finance, and she has also served as the head of the Directorate Management Unit in Her Majesty's Treasury, that is Ministry of Finance in the United Kingdom. She definitely has a very long CV, but that's just a bit of her. And Geraldine Sali, Miss Geraldine Sali, is going to be speaking to us about to pay or not to pay, and also looking at addressing the issues surrounding the access to social security funds. Remember what we talked about, like we did in our opening remarks, the answer is always the law. Ms. Geraldine Sali, thank you so much for joining us. I know you've been listening through, but we would also love to know we would like to get your objective view on the issues surrounding the access to social security funds. We know that currently the Parliament of Uganda is taking on the NSSF amendment bill. But we've always been told that one answer: the law does not allow us.
Sorry, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Am I on? Yeah, thank you very much for having me on your show. I've been introduced and my names have been communicated to our viewers. To pay or not to pay, it's a very long subject, but as you say, there is a pull and push from all different directions. I think we have really gone through the discussion and the justification of paying. Because for me, it is just as simple as, yeah, the law exists, but it was actually created by human beings sitting in our parliament. And I know that the law is usually adjusted for a cause. And now, if the cause happens to be saving lives, then it's actually well worth it. That is why you normally have bylaws, you normally have directives, for example, from the president. And any law can be adjusted, including the Constitution of the Republic of Uganda or any constitution of any country, without abrogating that law. So when you have got a case of an emergency, where we were well prepared would have been in making sure we have the different levels of emergencies. Now, where you have a global pandemic affecting Uganda, we could have had a preset standard or guidelines on how to handle emergencies. And if you look at the previous laws that were set within the lockdown, especially at the very beginning, it was said that nobody should get out of their houses. We were all under lockdown, and it became law immediately in the afternoon when the LDUs started to get people off the streets. And then it was gazetted 2 weeks later. So it means that the law is actually made by Parliament, made by the Chief Executive, and even the directives can become law. So this is what we actually needed, because other countries have actually done it. If you look at South Africa, the South African Social Security Agency brought a very quick product they called the COVID-19 relief grants. And they were given to everybody across the country, about 250 rand immediately. But that was improvised and it was never there. And then the money from their Social Security Fund as well as their insurance started helping citizens. And this program is going to run up to October. So very many other countries improvised. If you go to Canada, they improvised what they called the COVID relief emergency benefit. They actually give money to a maximum of about $1,750 per month for everybody. So you can see that countries had to adjust very quickly and save the situation. So this is what we also needed to prepare and have as an emergency. So the law then stops becoming dogmatic. It has to suit the purpose of its intention. The intention is when there's a rainy day, you actually have to save lives. So for me, I think that was the most important thing that we needed to emphasize in terms of the flexibility of the law. We shouldn't read it on the literal approach of what it says. We must look at the spirit of that law, which the lawyers, our learned friends, call the golden rules, and we must also look at the intention or the purpose of that law before we go into the literal approach of the law. Thank you very much.
As we think about, the spirit of the law, there's also been a conversation around, even if the law allowed, the money to pay out is actually not there. Doesn't that cause, a kind of deadlock?
Sorry, say that again, please.
Well, the money to pay out has got to be available as well. And there's been talk around the money not being available, even if the law would accept for the money to be paid out. Isn't that a deadlock then?
No, I don't really think it's a deadlock because, as I said, look at the countries going through paying their members. This program is actually, most of them are running up to October. If you see the UK, they are paying up to the 31st of October. So even if I was to wait for a rollover of securities, because those are the near cash assets the fund holds, the near cash assets are the securities and the fixed deposits in the banks. There are penalties for exiting those positions. However, if you weigh them against saving the lives, I think it would be well worth it. And that is what all the other pension funds are doing and all the other government emergency fund programs are doing. They liquidate their assets, which are the near assets, and then they start transferring money. In fact, what these people have done, their members already have chip and PIN cards. So they will just wire the money on their cards without a lot of administration burden. So because the systems have already been set up. So once the assets are liquidated, especially the ones which are like short term, like 3 months, you can couple those together with the contributions that come in on a monthly basis and then start paying out these contributions to the people who most need them. South Africa, again, for example, has been doing applications. So you have to apply, and then people have got to qualify you for eligibility. So not everybody is getting that money, but it's those who most need it, especially those with salaries less than 500 Rand. So there have been qualifying factors for them to get this money. So I don't think it should really be a problem.
Ms. Geraldine Saleh, there's also been the discussion that this is a social security fund. It's not more of a savings account where you can withdraw money as and when. And that is being put in the context that the saving culture of Uganda is very poor. And even when you look at the social security fund, when people are given their money after they attain the mandatory age, much of this money is actually taken up in the first 5 years, and literally someone has any other fund after that time.
Oh, thank you very much for that. Now, as I have always been saying, that a social security fund that is, for example, mandatory within a country is just a subsection of the social security and protection and insurance of social life. It's just part of the universe. For example, a pension fund can actually be designed and created for old age vulnerability. And like again, if I check like Tanzania, they have got about 4 mandatory schemes, all doing different things for different parts of the sectors, government sectors and private sector. So the design, it's all in the design of a scheme, and also the role that they play within the social security universe. Now, other countries have got what they've called an emergency fund. Now, for things like these, they have actually drawn from their reserves to cater for the economic stimuli for small businesses, medium-sized businesses, and also the most vulnerable poor of their country. I don't like to use the word poor, but just the vulnerable people. So those funds have been put in place, and they're actually being used. So those countries have been well prepared. Now, in our country, to the contrary, you will find that the only thing that someone has to look at now is the mandatory scheme of the private sector, which is the Social Security Fund. So it is circumstantial. It's not like by choice that people choose to look at NSSF. It's because that is the only thing they have got to save them for having the next meal on their table. Especially if the lockdown went on and on and on, their resources that they've saved have been stretched to the limit. So they're left with no choice but to look at the only hope they have, which is now NSSF. So, but in other countries, they didn't even have to look at their mandatory schemes at all. because they were all very well prepared. If you even countries within Africa, by the way, if you go to Ghana, Ghana has been giving their citizens money, the most vulnerable poor, and at the same time they have been exempting them from some taxes for a holiday, and government is also putting more money in their consolidated fund to help their businesses as part of the stimuli. So there's a whole relief package which is being pushed, and I'm hoping that even us here in Uganda, we are looking at these things and learning as we go along. So that is the long and short of it. It's not that they choose to look at NSSF alone, as it's supposed to be a pension fund, but because it's circumstantial. So maybe next time we shall be more prepared. When we don't have to look at this pension fund, we now have to improve our savings culture. Yeah.
Geraldine, Sally, that's an excellent view you have. Please stand by, because the conversation is continuing and would like to hear more from you, but would like to bring somebody else in, another of our panelists. And since we've talked about, the discrepancy between the law as written and what the law was meant to address, let me now introduce Mr. Patson Arinaitwe. He is a partner with Signum Advocates. He has over a decade of experience in advising businesses in corporate and commercial matters, especially both transactions and commercial disputes. He has represented many businesses in numerous precedent-setting employment and other commercial disputes. He has also been at the forefront of advising employers and on employment matters in relation to day-to-day business, in mergers and takeovers, in restructuring and redundancies, as well as implementing employee benefit schemes. He is currently the convener of the Employment Law Cluster of the Uganda Law Society, and he sits on the Industrial Court Users Committee. Mr. Arinaitwe, you've heard our panelists talk about the law as it is and what the law should have been. How do we integrate these two so that the law is working for those the law was made for?
Thank you very much, Gabriel. Of course, when you talk about law, it's a bit difficult for you to envisage each and every situation. And COVID is one of those situations that I think was not well envisaged under the law. Our employment and labor laws have some basics in terms of covering such situations. But when you look at, for instance, our Employment Act, it envisages pandemics, epidemics, civil strifes, or what we call acts of God that can limit work. But the challenge we have is that every time there's such a pandemic, the law only envisages a situation happening for almost 15 days. While during those 15 days, the employer is still required to pay the employer, even when the employee is not working. But the bigger discussion is in regard to situations where the pandemic has extended beyond the 15 days. There's lockdown, which means production has been affected, consumption has been affected, and many employers or businesses now have to adjust their businesses. They can't make the revenues, and yet they need labor that is locked up at home because of the lockdown and other preventive measures. Since 1st of April, we've seen regulations made under the Public Health Act, primarily to cater for health and safety. There are a number of obligations on the employer to ensure that there's health and safety at work. But the challenge we have is that the businesses must ensure that they continue. You now have two competing interests. One is business survival as a result of labor being locked out of work, but also you have government discussion that seems to suggest that now job security is very important. I've heard the commissioner write to the state that don't be quick to terminate. But now you have a competing interest with the businesses that have to survive. They have to cut costs. But what are the legal implications? From the legal mind, I think I would advise every employer to be cautious because of the nature of our legal regime, which some people have interpreted as the employee charter. There are quite a number of steps you must take, explore different options before you make the decision. But the primary or the core legal implications are, especially in health and safety perspective, the obligation to ensure that the workplace is safe for work is critical. If you decide to adopt the remote workplace method, there are quite a number of legal challenges. A good example is how are you going to sustain employee rights when they're working from home in terms of the weekly rest, the working hours. What happens if somebody gets injured at home while working? There could be issues of workers' compensation that might, set in. So beyond the duty to provide work and the duty to give the wages, you have other far-reaching consequences that are likely to come with legal implications. We've talked about laying off people as a result of not, having work. I must caution most of the businesses that you must ensure that you go through the legal processes before you effect any termination or restructure. Our industrial court has been very busy, and I think they're keen on protecting rights, even amidst, COVID. The aspect of consultation with employees that the commissioner talked about is very, very important. We have a dogmatic law, which was made in 2006, a bit rigid and prescriptive. Now, the situation we have is not prescribed for, meaning in coming up with innovative ways on how to deal with employment issues, consultation has to be at the center of such. You cannot, for instance, wake up one day and say, your salaries have been reduced without consultation, because the law provides specific circumstances where an employer can deduct salaries. Therefore, to be able to reduce someone's wage because of COVID, then you must take a different innovative route that is within the context of our legal regime. All right,
Mr. Arinaitwe, before you finish with that, yes. You have mentioned it, the commissioner mentioned it, consulting with the employee. What exactly does this mean? Are you saying that business owners should call the employees and agree with them how big of a cut can be taken? Because the business owner knows how much money is there. So what does consultation mean in this case?
Probably the consultation is in light of what the law provides. Like I said, the law is very prescriptive. For instance, to deduct somebody's salary, you must deduct within these circumstances. Either you are remitting NSSF or you are remitting labor union fees and other, like pay-as-you-earn taxes. The law does not envisage, for instance, reduction in the wages. So that means that for you to unilaterally alter the contract of an employee by way of reduction of wages without consulting, that will certainly be a breach of the contract.
And if the employee says, no, I don't accept?
Yes, certainly, being a contract of employment, you expect the consultation to be two-way, not a one-street way where the employer decides, I'm reducing. The employee might decide, I don't want a salary cut, and then the employer must explore other options. If you are not part of the business, if you cannot understand that the business is struggling, and what we're doing is to ensure that there's job security, but there are innovations in terms of either salary cuts or unpaid leave to ensure that you secure a job, then you leave the owner with no option but to explore other avenues, which might include, collective termination as a result of economic constraints.
All right.
Well, but maybe, Gabriel, just before Patson goes away, we're talking about the employers and employees having a discussion. Yes. That more speaks to employees who are empowered. Do you think, out of the research that you've done as Signum advocates, that we do have empowered employees? Because we have instances of where employers even get to talk to the employees, telling them that, look here, we have so many people out there who are looking for jobs. People who are even willing to work at half your pay. So this kind of discussion seems to be between an employer and an empowered employee. But right. Are our employees empowered that much?
Do they even have contracts in the first place?
Exactly.
Yeah, certainly we must first go back to the law. I think we have one of the best employment laws, especially the Employment Act, that when it comes to protection of the employee, they are prescribed the bare minimums. And in fact, if you do not consult, then you risk financial exposure if there's a labor dispute in court. So while we may not have an empowered employee workforce, the Employment Act or the laws provide the basics within which they can actually, negotiate. I think a well-advised employer would understand that failure to follow such process would expose the organization to financial risks. So the consultation is not an option, especially where you don't have pre-contractual arrangements. So even if you do not have a contract as an employee, that may not be a problem of the employee, but of the employer. Because we have, I think, Section 59 of the Employment Act that requires an employer to provide particulars of employment to the employee. And failure to provide such particulars is actually a crime. So while you may have employees that may not be empowered, they have the law that actually provides the bare minimum in terms of, the protection. So if you do not, consult and the law does not provide you with a backup, you actually run into a risk of dispute that might take the company down in defending such labor disputes, especially where you are dealing with a multitude of employees. I can understand the challenges of consulting during COVID. You have lockdown.
Yeah.
But I think we do have now, social media, WhatsApp, you have internet, where the employer can actually reach out to the employee to ensure that at least they have a recorded consent or an agreement, either to roll out unpaid leave or to cut the salary. Otherwise, there's a huge risk, and I envisage quite a number of labor disputes arising out of such an arrangements that are either not pre-agreed in the contracts or not provided for under the law, but they're being rolled out by businesses.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Patson. We'll be getting back to you. I just want to remind our viewers that this is the Labour and Employment E-Conference. It's annual. The difference with this year is that it's come during the COVID-19 pandemic, the lockdown that's coming through, and that's and issues of social distancing, the reason why it had to be an E-Conference. This is organized by Signum Advocates together with the partners, Liquid Telecom and NBS Television, to bring you this. And like I said earlier on, you can also engage on social media using the hashtag LabourCon 2020 or Labour Conference 2020, but you can shorten that to LabourCon 2020. We'll be able to send in to have your questions answered. But kindly, when you're sending in your question on social media, make sure that you do address it to the participant that you want to have, this question answered. We're still going on with the discussion, but we'll also in just a bit be having a panel discussion. We were still having currently our keynote discussants, but on our panel, we are expecting Mr. Dennis Ruhindi, who is listening in. We know we are expecting Madame Florence Namata-Maweje, who is also listening in. Mr. Francis Kamlegea will also be joining us as well. And we still have Miss Geraldine Sali, who is still here with us. Patson Arnitwe, who is just the previous speaker and also still in studio. We still do have Mr. Alex Asimo, who is the Commissioner Labour, Industrial Relations and Productivity in the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development. I love to call that the Ministry of Everyone because it literally does encompass everyone. And with me in studio, of course, my co-host, who is Gabriel Iguma, as we take you through this conference. But maybe before we let you go, Patson, you earlier on talked about some of the situations that we do have. Some employers have asked their employees to work from home. But you mentioned two important aspects. One, on how they will be able to look at the other employee benefits, for example, resting days and all that. But also the aspect of an employee getting injured at home. So would we consider that a work hazard because they're at home, but they're performing duties for you, the employer? How does the law take all this concept into action?
Of course, the COVID is pushing us into novel situations. Our Workers' Compensation Act and Occupational Health and Safety laws envisage workplace as we know it. And most cases you see, Commission of Labour requesting registration of workplace. Now we have a situation where now employers have been forced to be innovative to turn homes into, workplaces. But what is critical, probably I didn't mention, is the fact that the obligation to provide tools of trade of work will remain with the employer, whether it's at the physical workplace or at home. So it may not be a workplace in the context of the law, but I think there are certain basics. If, for instance, you have a chair that is not for good health, or for instance, you develop a back problem at home, that could be a challenge, especially if you are working, long hours. That could be seen as an accident at work. So as we roll out the work from home or remote workplace program, I think it's important for us to design policies to cater for that. I envisage a situation where you have employers being held liable for such accidents. As you roll out, are you sure that actually the home setting is actually conducive for work, or for the nature of work you're taking the employee to work? So the accident or the injury will be determined on a case-by-case basis. So it's a bit difficult to say yes or no, but it has to be seen whether the injury or the accident actually relates to work. And my preliminary view is that it's possible. For instance, if I'm working 12 hours on documents, and I develop a work problem as a result of such engagement, it's possible that could be a work-related injury that is compensatable under the Workers' Compensation Act.
Okay.
Patson, can the employer blame that on the government? Because the employer is not the one who required you to work from home. The government ordered that all of us should stay home.
That's very true. But the challenge is that what do you leave with the employer if you decide that because the government has rolled out directives that we can't go to office, therefore stay at home, and you decide that, well, since we have this lockdown, then there's no work. The challenge is that with the nature of our economy, labor has to meet capital for us to be productive. So without labor, it becomes difficult to be productive and sustain businesses. And that's why it becomes important to ensure that we even retain work at home.
Right.
If not, then the alternative is likely to cause unemployment in the country.
Since we're talking about working from home and the way work has changed because of the lockdown and COVID-19, I think it's the right time to bring in a human resource manager. And we do have on the line Mrs. Florence Maweje. She is a businesswoman, human resource professional, and corporate executive who serves on a number of boards for public and private companies in Uganda. She is currently the General Manager, Human Resources at Centenary Rural Development Bank. Her wealth of experience in corporate, human resource management and development spans across multinational organizations in banking, telecommunications, fast-moving consumer goods, and non-governmental organizations in Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Malawi, and Zambia. Florence served as the General Manager, Human Resources at MTN Uganda between 1998 and 2009. Prior to that, she served as the Human Resource Manager at Care International Uganda. That was between 1996 and 1998 when she joined MTN. She's also served as the Human Resource Manager Director, East and Southern Africa Business Cluster at Unilever, Kenya. She is a board member of several institutions, including the National Social Security Fund, Umeme, and Uganda Clays Limited. Mrs. Maweje has previously served as the president of the Human Resource Managers Association of Uganda and as a board member of the World Federation of People Management Association. She is an executive coach and mentor to young people, especially young women. Mrs. Maweje, you're welcome. And please tell us what the new work environment is and what human resource managers are doing to ensure that there's still productivity even when people are working at home.
Thank you very much. As human resource managers, definitely this is one of the challenges that we have faced, I think, in the history of employment, where we had this pandemic, and it brought up a disruption in the business environment, which definitely affected the banking sector. The banking sector, I'll focus on the banking sector. We were identified as an essential service, and we had to provide service during the lockdown and in all this period of the pandemic. The challenge was the transport was also temporarily deferred. Then we had to find a way of getting the staff to the premises. But at the same time, we had to also make sure our staff are safe and make sure that even the clients that we are serving are served safely. That was a challenge, but one of the things that we had to evoke was the business continuity plan for the business, and we had to go into a risk management mode whereby we had to ensure safety of our staff, but at the same time provide the necessary personal protective equipment. Of course, that was a challenge also in terms of availability of such facilities like masks, sanitizers, providing both for the client and both for the employees, making sure we observe the social distance, and at the same time making sure that we also look out for the vulnerable staff. So we had to also identify skeleton staff that we would work with so that we observe the Ministry of Health guidelines as well as our own standard operating procedures. The other challenge that we faced, which my colleagues have already mentioned, was the legal framework within which we were working and how to deal with such a situation that had not. We had faced things like Ebola and all those, but we were in control because we could actually address them internally without having to wait for external guidelines. But this was a global pandemic, and we had to do what we had to do, making sure that we provide the necessary protective equipment.
Go right ahead, we can hear you.
Okay. Oh, okay. Then, of course, as we continued, despite the challenges of the new environment, as a corporate organization, we were not on an island. We were actually affected by the business that was affected. Our clients are in the tourism industry, they are in the manufacturing industry, they were in all these trades that were affected. And locking down of these businesses meant that our clients all over had been affected. And that in itself affected our, of course, bottom line. And that then the major question comes in, as already mentioned, what do we do? We are generating less than the income that we were generating, but we have this fixed cost of staff. And of course, there's this always the question, the productivity has gone down. Then we had the challenge of how do we make sure that our staff remain active, despite the fact that the mobility was restricted, and at the same time, they also had to be given work to do. So we had to identify staff that could work from home. But working from home meant providing them, again, facilities and making sure that they have the necessary tools to be able to deliver what we wanted them to deliver. And we had to work with our business technology team to make sure that these people were facilitated. But at the same time, we were conscious of the cyber security and the data protection of their clients, and making sure that the information that is provided is protected, and you are able to also monitor the staff that are using this information, because they are spread out into various areas, and you must be sure that they are secure enough to be able to also secure the equipment of the bank, as well as the equipment, the information that they access. All these were challenges that we faced, but HR was at the center stage, but we did not work alone. Remember, the line managers are people managers, so we all had to work as a team. This called on all of us to agree and come together and see how do we manage these people and how do we make sure they stay safe, but at the same time they continue to provide service and at the same time they continue to be productive. So it was a teamwork. We had to work together as a team. So at that time, we then started looking at the various ways, how do we keep the organization afloat? Because as we work together, still the income is not sufficient. Then there was how to keep the staff safe as they still serve their clients, especially clients who are not coming to the bank, because the traditional way was to come to the bank. Then we had to use what we call the alternative channels, innovation and thinking around what what resources we had and how we had to extend these resources, these services to the clients. We had to use the alternative channels. Technology had to kick in. What COVID has actually done was to accelerate all those products that we had been working on, using, but the uptake was low, had to be now pushed forward to make sure that we reach our clients without necessarily having to have them come into the banking hall. We are now looking at the hours again. The hours were reduced from 8 to 5 to 9 to 3, which meant we are now again working fewer hours. At the same time, there was curfew. So we had to also manage this time and see how we manage it. But what we did was to remain within the law as we implemented. There were those staff that could not work from home. They could not work from the office. And by the nature of their work, they could not provide any productive service. But they had accumulated leave. So we had to go into that space to see how we manage staff taking off that time and being able to remain in employment. Within at least the bank I work for, we did not lay off any employees, but we shared information with our colleagues on our Uganda Bankers Association, the HR community, and we were able to share information and see how do we deal with the staff. This was very, very important, and the networks were very, very helpful. So that's how we managed to go through the lockdown period.
Exactly, you tracking the performance of those who are not working from the office, those that are working from home.
This was new for us in the labor market, but for some of us who had been on an international context, it wasn't a new phenomenon, because many organizations, especially the multinational organizations, they do practice working from home. But of course, when the COVID came in, it was abrupt. We did request people to work from home. And of course, they were providing the outputs of what they had worked on. But the normal procedure would be to agree on the targets and know what will be the outcomes that the person will be able to deliver at the end of working from home. Really, working from home is a self-discipline phenomenon. That's why you find it very minimally used among informal sectors and also some of the private sectors, because self-discipline of people is very difficult. You cannot tell somebody to be at home and work from 8 to 5. So what you do, you agree on the outputs, and you know that you give the staff a discretion, but at the same time you engage them.
Okay.
There are many ways of engaging. Of course, with the technology, we are able to engage. But it is really, really reliant on the individual's self-discipline.
And what do you, as the employer, provide an employee who is working from home?
Okay, I will still focus on the experience we've had. Number one, you must give them the necessary tools. Of course, things like the laptop, depending on what work they are doing. You give them access to information so that they can be able to work with the information if they are working on reports. And if you provide them with data, sometimes the data may not support the kind of input that they need. They may need VPN, use of VPN, so that they can access the information so that they can be able to work. However, the employee has to make sure that the environment within which the employee is working is also conducive for them to work. There are many interruptions that they undergo, but it is an agreement. And in most cases, employees do respond to that.
All right, thank you very much, Florence. We'll definitely be getting back to you in just a bit. We know that you are still online. We want to be moving on to our next panelist, who is none other than Francis Kamlegea. Francis is a country senior partner at PricewaterhouseCoopers, Uganda, and a member of PricewaterhouseCoopers Africa Governance Board. He has worked with PricewaterhouseCoopers for 26 years and been a partner in the firm for 15 years. Mr. Kamlegea's professional work extends to both corporate and personal taxation, financial, commercial, and investment advice, also working with a wide range of clients, including PricewaterhouseCoopers global multinational clients with operations in East Africa, mainly in the manufacturing, the telecoms and financial services, but as well as in the emerging oil and gas sector. Francis also serves the country in various other roles, which include the member of the National COVID Emergency Relief Fund. And we are talking about this discussion because of the COVID-19 pandemic. He's also a chairman, Lubiri Kabaka's Mengo Palace Development Committee, and a founder and director of Masaka School for the Deaf. He is very passionate about serving, knowledge sharing, talent development, and defines his purpose as uplifting and inspiring people with the objective of actually leaving them better than he did found them. And at this year's Labour and Employment Conference, which is happening right about now, the one that you are watching, Francis, we would like you to kindly focus on how businesses should prepare to deal with the effect of the pandemic at a financial and operational level, because I think also we did have Patson talking about it, the aspect that there has to be a survival of businesses, yet government is also looking at don't cut salaries, do not lay off people, and all that. Please, Mr. Francis Kamlegea, take it up.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, viewers. First of all, thank you, NBS, Liquid Telecom, and Signam for organizing this conference. COVID-19 lockdown in particular, I would say, has challenged all of us in a manner that we had never experienced, let alone anticipated. I think it's very, very important as business leaders to, first of all, acknowledge that nobody prepared themselves for this. We have seen mighty nations that we always look up to as having the answers to all the problems of the world being put to their knees. So Ugandans, for starters, we should be very proud the way it's been managed so far. Secondly, we should also appreciate the fact that lockdown was not a cure to COVID. So when we talk about post-COVID, I think we're talking about post-COVID lockdown, now that the lockdown has been lifted gradually. So all the previous speakers have elaborated on key issues that are very, very pertinent for all of us, people in business, employers, employees, and government in particular. And now that we've gone back to some semblance of normalcy, it's really important to reflect on the lessons learned. And that's where I'm going to start from. Whereas COVID pandemic is essentially a health problem, I look at the way we have suffered from a personal level, community level, business and companies, and a national level, not just Uganda, but internationally. And I think it has tested our resilience. And I put it very simply that we have all failed the fitness test as far as resilience is concerned. And it's for that reason that we shouldn't be lamenting about the past, but learn from it. At a national level, if you have a country that in a period of, say, 6 weeks is struggling to feed its people, the so-called food basket of Africa, we then need to look into ourselves as Uganda. We look at how we deploy our limited resources. We look at agriculture, which is the major source of employment to many of our people, and how much we have invested in that sector. And thank God that we are not a food importing country. That is the only reason, in my view, why we managed to survive lockdown without people having to go to work. But the lesson from there is we need to focus on that particular area where we have a major competitive advantage and build on whatever is on the ground as far as agriculture is concerned. And this time around, it's not about policies and white papers and workshops and seminars. It is actually doing things that are tangible, that are physical, and are going to deliver results on the ground. If we look at the businesses as enterprises, it's a bit concerning to see that our businesses can struggle the way they've struggled simply as a result of 30 days, maybe 60 days of not trading. And you struggle to the extent that you have to lay off the most important resource that in your business. And that is not the computers you left in your building. It is not the furniture and tables that were locked down in the office. It is the people. You look after your people looked after your clients, they look after your clients, and the finance and profits are a consequence of that. So the fact that after 30 days, businesses were telling the employees, we can't afford to pay you, and for that matter, stay home, I think also begs a question about the resilience of our enterprises and private sector. And whereas I'm not here to judge, I'm simply saying let's learn from this lockdown and experience and ensure that we're better prepared as enterprises and companies to weather these kind of storms, because the new normal is volatility, uncertainty, and there's going to be so much of these things that are thrown at us, whether it is technology, whether it is pandemic, whether it is civil stress and riots, whether it is, I mean, you look at what's happening in the US right now in the back of the COVID pandemic, by the civil unrest that has been happening the whole of this week. So we need to ensure that we are more resilient as businesses and prepare ourselves for a rainy day. At a personal level, again, reflecting on the discussion earlier on whether to pay or not to pay, Geraldine talked about the right view from her perspective. I think Alinaitwe earlier on talked about the law. For me, I'll just again put it at the level of resilience. And if you're an employee and you've been working for the last 10 years and suddenly there is a slowdown in the money coming your way, you've been saving with the NSSF for 5 years, and just after 30 days, maybe 45 days, the stress is so high that you want to dip into that pot. Then again, it says a lot about us individuals, our lifestyle, and how we are spending our money. So let us all reflect from the last 60 days and commit to do things differently. From a work perspective, I urge employers and advise colleagues who are in business, this new normal, which has been talked about, is going to require a certain different level of leadership. People have been at home for 60 days. People are coming back different, those who are coming back. Those who are not coming back we have to be humane and compassionate the way we deal with their situation. It is very quick for one to look at cutting costs, and they look at employees as the first place to cut. Unless you're planning to close shop completely, I think you'll be ill-advised to start there. There are so many ways that you can actually engage, consult, whatever the word is. I mean, the lawyers have talked about it. But if I was an employee earning $1 million shillings, and my employer came to me, and I know our company is a hotel, and we make money by people coming in our hotel, and we serve food, drinks, and they stay in our beds. And for the last 60 days, that has not been happening. I know for sure that we've not been earning. And if my employee came and told me, I've been paying $1 million shillings, but this time I can only afford 100,000, 10%, I can tell you I will accept that other than going without. So, and maybe 10% would be too low to start with. But my point is, employers, employees, we are in this together.
All right.
The same goes with businesses, landlords, banks. This COVID has been so indiscriminate that anybody who is insensitive and overzealous and heavy-handed is going to be doing the wrong thing. So there are times when you have to do the right thing, and maybe that right thing is not necessarily what the law says. Like, again, the earlier speaker said, the laws are made for us, the human beings. So my appeal, request as an employer, as a professional services provider, is let us all engage, because this thing, nobody prepared for it. At a national level, let there be behaviors from our leaders that reflect the fact that they're also hurting. Because if we're being told to tighten our belts, and we then see the excesses that we've been used to see, whether it is convoys driving past us, whether it is the wanton way money is being used from the public resources, if that continues, then the leaders of ours will have lost the moral authority to ask us to do anything to contain ourselves and cope with this pandemic. So we are in this thing together. It does not respect royalty, it doesn't respect titles, it doesn't matter how many ambassadors you have at your gate. All you have to do is wash your hands, wear a face mask, and sanitize. Now, you tell people how important it is to wash your hands. You had better provide water to Ugandans everywhere in Uganda, so that we now can wash our hands, let alone having water to drink. I'll pause there for now.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Kamulegea. This is the Labour and Employment e-conference brought to you by Signum Advocates and NBS TV, powered by Liquid Telecom. This conversation is also going on social media, so if you can visit any of the NBS social media pages, you will be able to follow what is going on here in studio. This conference is also being streamed on Microsoft Teams, and this is also powered by Liquid Telecom. I'd like to now bring in Mr. Dennis Kahindi, who is the CEO of Liquid Telecom. He was appointed to this position in March of 2019. He is responsible for accelerating Liquid Telecom's growth and market penetration in this important region. He has more than 15 years' experience, having previously worked in senior executive roles at Oracle and Microsoft in Rwanda and in Uganda. Dennis has been lauded for his talent, vision, and insight, which help to cement customer successes, create new customer relationships, and build on the company's reputation for communications innovations. Dennis possesses proven senior management and operational leadership skills gained across diverse communication and other organizations. Prior to this appointment, he was the business lead of Oracle in Rwanda and in Kenya and Uganda. He was also previously the country manager of Microsoft in Uganda and Rwanda. Dennis's area of expertise, his areas of expertise include strategy development, sales and marketing leadership, profitability and cost analysis, contract negotiation, and strategic alliances. Mr. Kahindi, we know that the telecom industry, one, is being looked at as a critical accelerator, critical partner in empowering people working from home. What exactly is the telecom industry doing to ensure that this new normal is actually a workable normal?
Thank you so much for hosting us here, and thank you for very insightful discussions that are being run by the different panelists. 70 odd days ago, our country was thrown into a shock. The future, as we employers and our employees knew it, totally changed. We were called upon to master different resources to change the way that our lives are going to be almost immediately. Some companies had prepared, a few others hadn't. That day 70 days ago is now a distant memory. From the discussions that we are hearing, it's almost a mournful memory. But there is no need to catastrophize it, because we think there are benefits that we've seen from this COVID situation, not just for the employers, but also for the employees. We've gotten to learn so many things, not only about the disease itself, but about the ability that we as human beings have outside of what we thought was normal. On or about the 15th of March, we at Liquid decided to do a simulation for all our staff, working from home for about 2 weeks. Unfortunately, they've been away much longer than probably anybody else, largely because we allowed the simulation to move into the government-directed plan for people to work from home. What we got to learn then is how important the telecom sector is to the lives of all our staff, we as a business, but most especially to our customers. We got to realize that we as the telecom sector have been thrown right in the middle of everyone's livelihood. Our students needed to depend on us to continue any manner of education. Churches had to depend on us to continue any manner of worship. And businesses needed to rely on us to continue any manner of normalcy, if you want. So that's the place that the telecom sector has played. And I hope we've played it well. The impact on us as a sector was twofold. On the demand side, we saw a bit of a degrowth in the enterprise space. We saw customers that were hit heavily, customers such as the educational sector, the tourism sector, the aviation sector. Their hit, of course, translated in us being hit financially as well, understandably. Interestingly, we also saw tremendous growth in what we call our wholesale connectivity and the home users connectivity, what we call the fiber to the home and wireless connectivity. So while we saw a degrowth of about 20% on the enterprise side, we saw a huge upsurge of about 100% on the home connectivity. So there are things that we've learned from this that I think we can continue to carry forward. It is my view that we are not going to go back to the normal as we knew it. The different researches that have been done by different companies about working from home have revealed that probably that for most of the researchers, more than 50% of our staff prefer to have a mix between working from home and working from the office. So even our staff are telling us that we don't want to go back. We don't want to go back to the offices and work the way we used to work. we want to work a little differently. We then as players, and this is where we as Liquid are going, that we're making a radical shift from being just a traditional telecoms player to a technology player. We want to be able to help businesses not only manage connectivity side of their businesses, but also to manage things such as productivity that we had panelists such as Florence talk about. Establishment of a business continuity plan is just that. But beyond that is the call to the business. And that call to the business is, how do you measure the productivity of your teams when you're not watching them every day? It's a self-disciplined thing, but then now we as businesses need to begin to scrutinize that productivity much closer, because our default as human beings is not to work. So if I have a chance of working without of waking up and getting paid without working, I'll probably take it on. So we as a technology company now, because the next Liquid is a technology company, much more than just a communications company, we are trying to say that we are changing the business landscape from just connectivity to technology, and helping our users, helping our employees, and helping our customers as well be much, much more productive.
Thank you very much. Now, we've heard from all our panelists and discussants who would now like very quickly to engage with our viewer, whether you're viewing us on NBS television, whether you're following on Microsoft Teams, or from the social media pages that are streaming this e-conference. You can now send your question, and I'd like to request each of the panelists that when we direct a question at you, if you could just respond to it very quickly so that we can take as many questions as possible.
Oh, yes. Gabriel, I do have a question that's going direct to Mr. Arinitwe, which says that what can employees do, employees without anything like an employment contract and appointment letters do to save their jobs? Because in this case, employers can fire at any time they want. There is no job security here. Totally. To Mr. Patson Arinitwe, please, if you could answer that one. Coming in from Eric NUG. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that question. Maybe the misconception I want to first clarify is that what gives job security is not your contract. Okay. I think you have to look at the working relation. It's actually the employer who has the obligation to provide the particulars of employment. I think for such an employee, I would advise go to the HR or the supervisor and ask for the particulars. Job security is much more than the document. If you've been told not to come because of an employment contract, I think that would be a different issue, probably a labor dispute. But I would urge every employee indeed to ask for particulars of their employment, written particulars from their either supervisor or HR or whoever is manning the human resource department. So it's not purely the contract; it's the arrangement. All right. That helps.
Speaking of human resource, I have a question here from a human resource manager, Mr. Lukman Mukungu. He is from Umeme, and he asks Mrs. Maweje, how exactly are you going to do midterm appraisals when staff have not been working? I think Lukman is trying to find out how he will also do them from hearing from you, Mrs. Maweje. If you could take that question.
I'm sure you had some targets. I know NSSF was not among the essential services, but I'm aware that they were working from home. I presume you were given targets to give as output. If you had challenges on delivering those targets, you should have negotiated with your line manager to facilitate you to deliver on the targets. But I'm certain that definitely where in my space we've been able to review plans and revise in areas where we needed to revise to make sure that the targets remained relevant, which I presume you should have done that with your line manager.
You do these
and that's how we are going to review our midterm. Those who are at home, definitely there are areas where we know they had already served the first quarter of the year. We'll look at that, and as we go forward, we see how we align that to the new plans.
Okay, so do you do these appraisals on, Microsoft Teams, Zoom, and whatever other technological platforms are available? Or do these have to be in person? Because usually these are in person.
Sorry?
Mrs. Maweje, these appraisals are usually in person. Now, in this situation, will they be done on Google Teams, for example, or on Zoom, or by telephone? How exactly will the appraisals be done?
That can still be done because if you have an appraisal system, you do appraise yourself, and then you make an appointment with your line, and you can still do the appraisal. We use Zoom if you want it on person, or you can use the teleconference. What matters is to be able to agree and have the targets and and align with what you agreed. That should be. We've been able to do virtual disciplinary hearings, which was not a norm. So courts are actually doing their sessions on Zoom, on Teams. I think we need to change because the new normal does not warrant you to keep on having face-to-face engagements, especially with the social distancing practices.
All right, thank you very much. I want to take this one to Ms. Geraldine Sally. You earlier on talked about countries that have had different avenues of maybe liquidity that they could use to help out with the people who are in need in the country in such an area as having a pandemic. Out of your experience and the research that you have done, what sort of options could you give for Uganda in such a case, we will not probably be looking at only what we have in NSSF or getting to the banks to get out all our savings, because literally a bigger percentage of the economy is in the informal sector.
As a country, we have got to improve our savings culture. That's very important, because if you look at our lifestyles, I'm going to use the term that the president used, which is the Pentagon weddings. So someone is going to have all these Bill Gates dreams on a small border wallet and throw a Pentagon wedding. So most of the time we are living beyond our means, but it goes with a lot of sensitization of our people about the importance of saving. It goes with a lot of educating in terms of financial literacy. And then on the part of the people who are going to be sponsoring some of these saving schemes, to have three major ingredients, which is the first one, which is transparency when you're running some of these schemes, because people need to build their trust in anybody you're entrusting with your money, especially under the trust laws. Then you have got to have to give them the good returns, which would be able to give them the sufficient money to cater for those needs. And most importantly, the other thing is to improve our outward expenditure habits. Now, it is very important that if we develop the savings culture, it is going to improve the way we actually see our future and plan accordingly, because we are not going to be loading everything on one mandatory scheme. So you're going to have a cushion of safety nets, like layers. If you have planned for NSSF to look after your old age, an interim scheme in the middle could actually help you look at your immediate needs. Like, for example, if you lose a job, you have got a position to fall back on. Because it is very clear, for now, we are a young nation. The government is not yet in a position to give this kind of help when some of these eventualities happen. For example, we are the only country in Africa that doesn't have a social security policy that is implementable. As you can see in this circumstance where we've had this pandemic. So it means that in the meantime, you have to improvise on your own a plan B. And that plan B cannot come out of space. So people have got to increase their level of savings. But also on the side of government, I think the job creation is very important, because people will not be saving if they are not earning. So then there's the private sector where people are actually doing, they're self-employed and earning their own their own incomes. So those ones have also got to be encouraged, because most of the time they have the final say, and then they wait for our systems and society, which is, when I grow old, my children will look after me. I think that is a situation which may not necessarily be sustainable. And you want to be for sure that when you're vulnerable, you'll be looked after. So we have got to improve our culture of savings in order to do that. Now, in America, what they've done, they have got the individual retirement accounts where people actually save. So in times like these, you can actually call on that money. And they have got the flexibility, so which is one of the ingredients I was meant to allude to in my earlier submission in terms of schemes to be established. So when people trust and they know that when the rain comes, these people will actually bail me out, and it has been demonstrated, there is no reason why people would not save with you. So in the grand scheme of things, if we start off that culture of fostering savings, I think we can be in a better place than just relying on a few mandatory schemes which are really designed to cater for specific purposes of social security within our lives.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Kahindi, there's a question from Calito Obligante, and he says, Liquid Telecom, price points of offered products is a barrier, and it deters the adoption of technology. Also wants to find out how exactly the Google Teams works.
Okay, maybe I'll start with the last bit. I'm not so sure how Google Teams works, but I'm sure that Microsoft Teams is an enterprise product, way different from the retail product that we see on the market that most organizations are using and are getting Zoom bombed, if we call it that. So there are security issues around some of these tools. The difference between Microsoft Teams and those other tools is this is an enterprise product that you might want to adopt for your small and medium enterprise or your major enterprises, for not only the one-on-one connections with your teams, but also for the one-to-many. I have routine meetings through this work-from-home session. I've been having routine meetings with my entire staff base based on Teams, and any organization up till 10,000 users can log into the system and use it. So that's what Teams is really about. Regarding the price points, and I agree that the price points are a bit of a barrier. And this is the place where probably I would want the commissioner to go back to government that if we're going to be driving a skills development agenda, then there are certain enablers around skills development that you want to be touching on. One is the price of the internet. The cost of the internet as we know it right now is not very low. Compared to what it was 10 years ago, it's probably 10,000% cheaper. But it's still very prohibitive. That's why we see penetration levels for in our country at about 40.5%, leaving a whole 60% of our population unconnected and untouched. Reasons being really affordability, like you saw Obliganto so rightly says. The other one is really around the knowledge that people are not skilled enough to use the internet. And the third is around the coverage, that we don't have coverage all over the place. Now, bringing connectivity or bringing the internet like Liquid does all the way from the Mombasa coastline to here is a very expensive thing. Some of the laws that we have don't help it any better, because for every MB of internet that you consume, or every GB of internet that you consume, we as operators have to pay an additional 18% that we never pass on to you in what is called reverse VAT. It's a very prohibitive law that we think policymakers, such as the commissioner here, can go back and drive. That being said, that the packages that we have as Liquid for the homes are very competitive, because we're offering unlimited internet packages without any single cap. They're unlimited at less than $40 per month, less than 170,000 per month. So I think that is a very competitive package. If you're using that for your school, you're using that for your education, using that for your kids' school, and you're using that for work as well. So you connect so many devices at a cost of less than $40. I think that is still very, very competitive. I hope that answers that question.
All right, I'll definitely be getting back to you. Quite a number of questions coming through, but I want one particularly that is going to Mr. Alex Asimo. It's coming in from Grace Birikade, who asks, can an employee sue the employer in case of an accident while working from home, given that homes are not registered workplaces?
Thank you,
Grace.
Thank you, Grace. First of all, you need to know the definition of a workplace under the Occupational Safety and Health Act. A workplace is a place of work where workers are found as a result of their work or as a consequence of their work, and it includes living quarters. That's the definition.
Okay.
Now the issue is that you have workers working from home. Section 59 of the Employment Act is very clear. 59(1). It says that when you look at written particulars, one of the elements of written particulars is where the work will be performed. Meaning that if you are employed to be around Kampala Road, and now the employer is saying you have to work from your house in Entebbe, it means that has to be reviewed. That consent, that agreement has to be reached at. But most importantly is that the law provides for employers to come up with what we call a safety policy.
Okay.
Now, a safety policy is that document that highlights the commitment of the employer to ensure that the workers, the guests and the contractors are safe. Now, in coming up with a safety policy, you must first come up with what we call a risk assessment plan. Now, that risk assessment plan is the one that is able to inform you. And it is not an employer document. It is the company's document, the risk assessment plan. Therefore, you have to identify key hazards that are likely to be at home, at the house, or at the residence.
That is
of the worker.
An employer.
As an employer and the worker. You are doing this together because you have changed the contract of service. You have said, the contract of service used to say, you are working from Kampala Road.
Kampala Road, yes.
Now you are saying you must work from Entebbe.
So in any case, let's make it simple. In any case, if I get a problem working from home and my employer did not review my contract to include my home as part of the workplace, I can sue them if I get a problem.
Because there is a problem there. You know, that's what the Royal Senior Counsel was talking about, that you must, as an employer, you must look at the procedures. What are these procedures? It is not a must. It is not a matter of waking up and say, please work from home. I mean, you must look at it. And that's why is that when you do a safety policy, you are supposed to revise it. You have a risk assessment. Then it will tell you, because, look, you are giving somebody to perform from home, but he may not have an ergonomic equipment that enables him to perform the work.
Okay.
So meaning that if there is an accident, I mean, it can be, an issue can be entertained. So what is important, Grace, is that you have your rights. You can approach the labor office, and your issue can be looked at. And also, since it is an accident, as long as you are able to justify that the accident has been has occurred as a result of work or in the process of work, then you can be heard.
Okay. Gabriel, there is a very interesting one that is going out to you, Mr. Kamlegea. Joseph Biomuhanji asks, what's your take on responsible corporate social responsibility during the COVID-19 pandemic? Some companies are donating to the National Task Force and at the same time are laying off staff.
And we are not going to name names.
Exactly. But Mr. Kamlegea, take up this.
Thank you very much for that question. In my view, it's not an either-or. Corporates are responsible in communities where they do business. And this national pandemic has required everyone, individuals, corporates, organizations, international organizations, development partners, to respond to an appeal made by government which is aimed at saving lives. So if you're a company and you are persuaded by that appeal, in my view, I don't think it's about a choice of, do I save jobs or do I respond to that? Remember that as an employer, one, you have a duty to provide work to your employees. Two, you also have a contractual obligation to pay them. So a donation to the National COVID Task Force is a one-off, and you do it meaning well. But when you assess your ability to continue to pay salaries and you establish that you don't have it within the confines of the law as already elaborated and elucidated by the earlier speakers, companies have come to that conclusion and decided to either send people on furlough or lay off people. But I've shared my personal views on that. I don't think it is the immediate course of action to save costs. But I do not see anything wrong with a corporate donating money to a national appeal as a one-off contribution, while at the same time assessing their ability for continuity of employment and ongoing costs, and then decide on a course of action which they believe is in the best interests of both the company and in some cases the employer as well. Hard as it is, there are many people who have been laid off who have, as a result, gone actually to discover their destiny, whether it is entrepreneurship or doing something different, which is maybe something that they were designed for in the first place. So my answer is it's not an either or, and again, we shouldn't be judging. We should appreciate them for the contribution, while at the same time challenging them whether they've done everything possible to save jobs.
All right. We have more questions coming in than the time we have left.
Yeah.
Mr. Rinaitwe, there are a number of questions to you, and we have okay.
Yeah.
The time has been extended generously by NBS TV. So,
Yes.
Mr. Rinaitwe, Letitia asks, how fair are interviews during this period? She also asks, how are aspects of mental health of workers being taken into consideration during this period? Because COVID is affecting people's mental health.
And maybe to Mr. Arinitwe, if you could just remember those, add this one too, which is coming in from Joseph Ajal, who is asking, how does an employer who has already done collective termination for some employees regain the trust of returning them? Please go ahead, Mr. Arinitwe.
All right, thank you for those questions. Probably I'll begin with the mental health issue. You realize that employees have been away for virtually now 2-3 months.
Yes.
So in addition to reskilling employees in as far as technical skills is concerned, I think they need to be prepared, mentally. I was joking that some of us who are extroverts within this lockdown, we had to readjust our setting to be introverts because the environment is not, conducive. So you can imagine how people's temperaments have been tricked by virtue of the lockdown. So I would encourage or probably recommend that HR professionals in different organizations need to take this up. Quite a number of employees' productivity is always affected as a result of mental health issues. Unfortunately, it's something that most organizations have not taken up. Either they rush into poor performance, disciplinary hearings or terminations without looking at the fact that dealing with a mental health challenge is critical to an employee. So I may not have a direct answer, but to say that it's important that a program is put in place to reorient employees back, to workplace before coming back. Otherwise, you might see a drop in productivity, a drop in performance, or others deciding to resign for matters that had picked up during the lockdown. You've asked about how do you regain, the trust for people who have been collectively terminated, and I would want to answer that in light with the interview process as well. Before you decide to collectively terminate, I think most businesses must understand that the cost of onboarding employees is also high. By the time you onboard somebody up to the level where you are recouping the investment, it could take 2-3 years in terms of skilling. So while you might cut costs by retrenching somebody or terminating because of the cost, think through how much you will spend in onboarding people, orienting them, skilling them to a level where you can benefit from their labor. So businesses need to go slow on terminations, not only on facts that we've talked about and the commissioner, but also on the fact that as a cost of business, it takes a lot of time to go through the interview and onboard somebody at the level where they can be productive. So the interview process is always designed towards the business needs. There's no prescriptive method, at least from the private sector, on what you should consider, as long as you do not offend discriminatory rules under the law. So on interviews during this process will be designed in relation to the business. What are you looking out for from the employee, and are you able to pick them in addition to the background check? So when you talk about, again, the gaining confidence, one of the critical aspects of employment is that the employment relationship is built on trust and confidence. And once that trust is breached, whether by the employer or the employee, it becomes very difficult to rebuild it. And it will be dependent upon how you carried out the restructure, whether you put a human face in the process so that you can be able to gain the confidence. If, for instance, a company decided to lay bare their financials, look at, we've been affected, we can no longer afford this huge wage bill, and there's been transparency in the process you've consulted, I think any employee would understand if you call them back after the situation has normalized. But if you wake up one day and you serve people with termination letters because of the notice, certainly it becomes challenging to regain the trust afterwards. So I would encourage, lawyers or human resource or businesses who are conducting termination, you never know because it's not strange that employees who have been terminated are rehired because of the skill. But also think through the fact that these employees have been skilled for 5, 10 years. You are losing talent. And by the time you come back to normal, you've lost that talent that could help in building the business. So the trust has to be built not only prior, but also how you conduct the process of redundancy. Yeah.
All right. And maybe just before we do also let you go, there is another question coming to you, Mr. Patson, Mr. Rinichwe, and I think I am trying to get that particular one, but Gabriel also still has a number of those.
There are a number of them to
yes.
Mr. Rinichwe, and I think people get, they're using the chance to get legal advice.
Okay.
So what's your opinion on an employee who had been appointed and signed an appointment letter, 3 days to induction, is told to wait because of COVID? This employee had resigned from his or her previous job on which he was depending. So
wow.
Is this employee liable to payment from the new employer?
Well, when you get an employment contract, while the employment laws have been prescriptive, and that's usually the challenge with the employers, because a number of terms that would ordinarily be negotiable have been prescribed by the law. But also the employment contract is like any other contract. It also it's governed by a number of contractual principles. And one of them is frustration. A contract can actually be frustrated in such circumstance. The question would be, if COVID happened, what were you told? Are you pushing the commencement date? Did the employer tell you, instead of commencing your work now, let's wait for the COVID, or you are told because of COVID, now we cannot go ahead? And some of those contracts have probationary clauses, meaning in such situation they can decide to evoke notice under the contract to end the probation period, meaning you won't have a contract later. So the question would be dependent upon the conversation you had at the time. What were you told as the reason? Are they suspending the commencement date? Have you been told that they are evoking the probation clause so that a contract is cancelled? What was the communication? So it's difficult for me to have a direct answer without understanding the reason advanced at the time, other than just COVID. Was it terminated? Was it suspended? Or the commencement date was pushed up to the end of the COVID period? That is something that you need to look out for.
All right. Okay.
Maybe just before, as we do continue with some of these questions, a particular one I would like to put to you, Mr. Simwe. We have labor externalization, and many people would like to know how many countries do we have bilateral agreements with, and just how much is government tracking the working conditions of Ugandan migrant workers? Because this is very key. Each and every day on TV, we see some of these organizations and companies announcing, and yet in the same vein, we also get to see lots of stories about Ugandan migrant workers who've been harassed in the countries where they're working.
First of all, I think it is important to know that migration is as old as religion or Christianity. But also, most importantly, we need to know that the Constitution, Article 29, gives rights to any Ugandan can go out and return. So that's a very big point that I think Ugandans need to know. Now, as government of Uganda, we put in place systems that if you are going out to work, you must ensure that you go into the systems or channels that facilitate orderly, peaceful, and regular migration or seeking employment abroad. So, and these, we have regulations and we have companies that recruit Ugandans and deploy them abroad. Now, these companies are adhering to the employment, the regulations that are in place to manage externalization of labor. Now, our point of contact is not only with these companies, but also we have an engagement with our embassies abroad. We have some bilateral agreements with the countries like Saudi Arabia, and we do monitor. But what is critical and important, and what we have got, is that most Ugandans that have gone through the companies that are registered with Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development, all workers are accounted for, and there is a close follow-up and there is a close linkage. Even now as we speak, they continuously to report on the status of these workers and how they are. So I know my good friend is talking about those who are being exploited. Yes, those cases are there, but certainly most of them are not through the licensed companies.
Okay, and maybe also even those through the licensed companies. In such a time as COVID-19, we know the borders were closed, the airport was closed, and we know there are quite a number of Ugandan migrant workers who have been trapped in the other countries. Has government followed up on some of those cases?
Yes, you are aware that recently, I think a few days ago, government passed a resolution that it is going to repatriate those Ugandans that are, are in distress or are stressed abroad, and they will be brought back. And I think the number is around 2,000 or so. So government is following up with those workers, and we are also continuing to do that. But what is important here, I want Ugandans to know that as government of Uganda, our focus is to create jobs here. The externalization of labor is temporary.
Okay.
And that's why we have massive investment in infrastructure, in skills, in technology, in ensuring there is access to capital. Because you need to know that whereas Ugandans may want to go abroad, you may find that the conditions abroad are far worse than as we, and you have seen that in this country, you have seen some people actually are saying there is a crisis, there is a, but when you look at this country, look, agriculture has been operating, manufacturing industries have been operating, transport in terms of goods have been.
But far below the original capacity.
I'm coming to that. What does it mean? It means that we have also got new companies, new manufacturing facilities that have come up. So it means that whereas we have some households and people that have been affected in tourism and other key and other areas, there are equally other households and people that have gained from this. Like I'm very happy.
It would be good if you did the comparison, because Matovo Alex did give us the numbers globally of people who've lost income and lost jobs, and now you talk about creation. How big is that percentage in comparison?
This is very good. Now the government of Uganda, through the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development, is currently undertaking a rapid assessment on the impact of COVID on labor, employment, and productivity. And we have to produce this report within 2 months. Now, that report is going now also to inform other policy decisions that will be implemented in the future. But generally, we need to know that, as John F. Kennedy said, that when you define a crisis, when you write it in Chinese words, it is defined by 2 characters. One, danger, and another one, opportunity. So we have opportunities that we can, enhance as a result of COVID by ensuring that we build our resilient systems to produce goods and services for our people and export.
All right. We need to start bringing this to a close. I think let's go to each presenter.
Yeah,
to
but
give
maybe
us their closing remarks.
before
Do you
we
have
go to
question?
Yes, I do have some questions for Mr. Dennis Kahindi, and one is that is about data and cybersecurity. How can companies ensure this? Because I mean, we are talking about working from home, online working, and all that. How can companies ensure that? But also, one is asking about 5G internet. I mean, the upgrades of internet connectivity each and every time, but also this comes with dangers. One of the viewers is asking how best this can be used and how these dangers can actually be mitigated. Mr. Dennis Kahindi.
Thank you, Mildred. I'll start with the 5G question. Let me just debunk the myth. 5G mobile networks do not spread COVID-19. From what we've learned over the last 3 months, we know that viruses do not travel via radio waves, via mobile networks. We know that viruses, COVID-19 has spread in countries where there is absolutely no deployment of 5G. Uganda has just one test area. It's a test center for for 5G. And the cases that we're seeing related to COVID-19 are miles away from that test center. So let me just debunk that. COVID is spread through respiratory droplets. We know that. When an infected person coughs, it has absolutely nothing to do with 5G. But that being said, in the interest of technology, that we need to speed up as the industry, we need to speed up the 5G deployment because of the appetite that we see for the services. As I shared earlier, we saw an exponential growth on the home connectivity, in the home connectivity business. It's not going to go down anytime soon, which means that we require more capacity, and 5G will probably be our best hope for that. And we as Liquid are saying that we are already on the front lines of trying to develop and deploy 5G on the African continent. Regarding the question around data and cybersecurity, it's obvious that not very many companies were ready for the work from home. Even fewer companies were ready for an extensive or an extended work from home scenario. For the ones that were not ready, a few things needed to come into play. You probably needed to virtualize and safeguard some key business processes, if not all. What we have done and encourage most of our customers to do is to virtualize some of their services, because with the cloud, as provided by most players, you have security there. And most of your data is not only private, but also safe there. Security can be guaranteed via virtualization. But we're also encouraging most organizations that are coming up for our services to take on what we call multi-factor authentication. Most users know what this is now, that the system will ask you to confirm who you are through a secondary device. Most of us now have a laptop and probably 2 mobile phones, so we will probably ask for security purposes, for data security purposes, that you institute a multi-factor authentication kind of security to safeguard your data. Most organizations are not ready, but we're saying we understand why you're not ready. None of us was really ready. But now that we're here, let's respond to it. Let's reflect on it, let's reload, and let's relaunch. Thank you, Mildred.
So Mr. Kahindi, since we are with you, let's have your parting shot as well.
Oh, okay. For my parting shot,
yes,
I just want to say thank you again to NBS and the panelists that have been here to share with us really around the employment and the impact of on businesses, especially around COVID. I want to say that we, as Liquid, we will lead by protecting our employees first. We have secured the jobs of our people, and we're not letting go of a single staff due to COVID-19. We will not be doing that, and there is no plan around that. We will continue to protect the jobs of our staff. However, as a business, we might need to realign we might need to, like I shared earlier, that we are transforming ourselves from a telecom business to a technology business. That might require for us to acquire new skills, to realign certain processes, and as is usual with some of these kind of scenarios, certain jobs might become irrelevant and certain jobs might become more relevant. We're saying we have an opportunity for people to skill themselves through this work from home situation, and when the opportunity comes, please come and join us, because we are your partner for not only connectivity, but also technology.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you so much.
Kahindi. So remember to see the opportunity, even in this very dark situation. Now let's go over to Madame Geraldine Sally for your parting shot.
My parting shots are around a collective readiness and planning going forward, because there is not one government parastatal that could operate without the others, with cost synergies and core contingencies. So the trick is really going to be in terms of planning. For example, if it is to do with liquidity contingency planning, for those who will be spending in health, spending in social security. It's cut off.
Geraldine.
It's cut me off.
All right, we will just in a bit be getting back to Ms. Geraldine Sally to give us our parting shots. We will be going back to her. But in the meantime, Mr. Francis Kamlegea, if you could, in just a bit, give us your parting shots. Mr. Kamlegea, can you get me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please, kindly, your parting shots.
Yeah. Yes, parting shot is painful as the lockdown has been, and also the period we are going into. Let's learn from it. Let's not lament. Nobody saw it coming. It's not created locally here. Let's try and be more prepared for situations of this kind. Business leaders will need to be more agile. Decision making is going to be more robust, and most importantly, we need to learn to trust our people now that work is no longer a place, but work is what people do. It's focus on outcome, deliverables, and impact, as opposed to number of hours people put in, or when they turn up to work and when they leave. Business leaders, again, let's look at the resilience of our businesses. Many systems and operations procedures have been tested and stretched. Let's invest more in digital platforms, because that is the new normal of business. And finally, as they say, if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. It hasn't killed us. We should emerge out of this stronger.
All right, and we've gotten Ms. Geraldine Sally back. We did lose her a bit due to technology, but Ms. Geraldine Sally, kindly get us to your parting shots as you were earlier doing.
Yes, thank you very much for that. Sorry, I got cut off earlier.
It's
but
okay.
What I was trying to say is that the robustness and the speed at which any country would implement itself and apply itself in a period of contingency is how ready they are, especially around the IT infrastructure, especially because in a place like this where contact with other people would just increase or exacerbate the already bad situation of the disease, you're going to be relying on e-services. So e-health is going to be very important. E-justice is going to be very important. E-government platforms, in fact, that's where the Ministry of ICT comes in, very, very important, to set up some of these platforms so that they are readily available, the e-payment system, so that they are all readily available, and they create the flexibility that the country needs to deploy these limited resources efficiently and where they are most needed, and with impact, just like Mr. Kamlegea Francis alluded to earlier. So the e-trade as well, for example, all these goods that are coming in, you could see we are almost paralyzed by the truck drivers coming into Uganda. But if there is e-clearing services there, that would even be much faster and much easier. So e-health is going to be very important. Everything is going to be very important in terms of the flexibility and efficiency of a country and how fast we move. So I'm just glad that I was part of this, so probably be able to tell my grandchildren how we tell the stories of how we manage to cope, but also a learning point from so many angles and so many sectors going forward, and so many examples we've learned from other countries, even on this continent of Africa. So thank you very much for having us.
All right, thank you. Who knew that an e-conference would be possible in Uganda? All right, we now will move to Mrs. Florence Maweje for your parting shot as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for organizing this conference. I appreciate participation in the conference and being able to share our experiences and also learning from each other, and all the panelists that have contributed. Thank you so much. Thank you, NBS. And to our viewers, for the business people, especially the banking sector, the culture has changed. COVID has disrupted the business environment, but we need to change. We need to move. We need to move on. We were so slow in taking on the technology, but it's the new normal. We need to leverage it, and we need to invest in it as business people to make sure that we stay afloat and we continue leveraging the efficiencies that it comes with. To my fellow human resource managers and directors, I urge you to look at our policies. Together with the Ministry of Labour, we need to make sure that our Employment Care Act is relevant. We had a lot of challenges in trying to figure out this new normal existing in the uncertain environment. We need to think ahead and make our contribution to what the challenges were and what we need to put in place to enable us deliver in the new normal. There are many policies that we need to review, right from the recruitment policy up to the exit policy, making sure that we are able to cope even beyond COVID, because it's not the last pandemic. And then to the employees, thank you for being patient. Thank you for understanding. Continue to understand. We've all done this to make sure that we stay together and stay afloat. And whatever happens, let's engage as we did, so that we can be able to forge forward and make Uganda a better place to work in and live in. And to our press that has supported us in making sure we deliver on the communication, we thank you so much. Let's continue with the partnerships that we've forged during COVID, so that we make Uganda a better place.
All right,
thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Florence Maweje, right there for your closing remarks. And definitely the partnerships will continue. The press is right here to support the different aspects of the economy. And to you, Mr. Alex Asime, we would like to get your parting shots, but also remembering that we're counting down to the 2 months to get that report that government is working on.
Yes, thank you, Mildred. Whereas government of Uganda recognizes that there are households and persons that have gained as a result of this COVID, it recognizes that there are those families and individuals that are not able to meet the basic needs, for example, like food. Through the National Social Protection Policy of 2015 that provides for different policy strategic actions of protecting the vulnerable people through social care assistance, and insurance. Government continues to implement those interventions to ensure that the poor or the vulnerable are not left, behind. And that's why, for instance, when you talk about social protection, some people will think that it is something, but the ability of government to give food, the food that government has been distributing, that's a social protection intervention. The free medical, when you suspect that you have COVID, the healthcare team will come to you, pick samples, even treat you for free. That's a social protection policy. Now, the new emerging interventions of capitalizing the Uganda Development Bank and other flagship projects, Ugandans must, run and tap those opportunities in terms of capital, skills projects, tap into that. But also importantly, the innovation projects and ICT must be tapped at. Employers and employees, this is the time. The labor unions are in place. Before you take any decision, look at the law, the contract of service, and the collective bargaining, if any, because the labor unions are there even to help you to reach an amicable conclusion. But also, government has increased the personnel at the district level. We now have close over 150 labor offices. So take advantage. We do not want, as the senior counsel said, tomorrow to find that an employer is in huge litigation costs, and yet there is free guidance and advisory services that you can get either from government, labor office, or from the legal practitioners. And then lastly, I would like to thank Liquid and
Signum
Advocates,
and NBS for really bringing this. And I think the director, Liquid Telecom, was able to mention something to do with the cost.
Yes, government should come into
now.
That's
a very valid point.
Yes,
and that's why government continues to invest in ICT, and I'm very sure that issue will be addressed soon, because it is now a new normal that you have to use internet in order to deliver and produce goods and services. I thank you so much.
all right.
Thank you very much, Commissioner, who also was our special guest today with a keynote. We're now going to bring in Mr. Patson Arinaitwe. He just referred to him as senior counsel. And as I introduce you, they brought to my attention a legal alert, an interesting development in a Swiss court, where a court has ordered a company to make a contribution towards a former employee's rent because the employee was working from home. Is this something we can see in Uganda as you bring in your closing remarks?
Thank you, Gabriel and Mildred, for hosting us. As we switch operations as a result of COVID and lockdown, you have people working from home, readjusting your work policies or your work schedules. Please be mindful that there could be legal pitfalls.
Hold on.
And more than ever before, I think it is important for every business to do an audit of their policies. The HR manual, the policies you had for the last 2-3 years may not be able to work, going forward. So for HR people, for the in-house lawyers, the first task I would encourage you to do is first look at the policies and align them with the business operations. You can imagine business operations are changing, and therefore the policies of the organization must support that. Review your employment contracts, review the policies.
Maybe just a bit with, unfortunately did lose Mr. Patson's sound right there, but in just a bit, we're definitely going to be coming back to you, Mr. Patson. I didn't need to give us your closing remarks, and I think Gabriel did hint on a very interesting one. We're talking about working from home because of social distancing. That would be a very interesting one, by the way.
Yes.
I don't know how many people organizations would have then to be paying for the rent, because many have been working at home.
Well, I think I'm going to send my employer part of my rent bill, because my landlord doesn't seem to understand that we haven't been bringing in money. But for those of you who think this conversation ends here, the conversation does not end here. We have been on social media, and we have had the lawyers actually say that they will continue to interact with you. Just use our the hashtag, which is LabourCon 2020.
Yeah, and I think we're back with Mr. Patson Arinitwe to conclude with his parting shots. We do apologize about that, but Patson, back to you.
Yes, I was, elaborating on the fact that with the new normal, you cannot use policies you've had over the years to usher you into the new normal. You must have now innovative approach to work, look at the policies, and I think the starting point will be to do a legal audit of your policies. How do you stand with a new shift? Are you well protected? Challenge with most businesses, they think that you need a lawyer when a dispute arises. But I think it's more important to engage legal support as you build new policies, as you review your manuals and the contracts, not only employment, but also contractual obligations like financing, tenant agreements and the like, because we are getting into a new era that requires a new outlook. So it's important that you review policies, get new ways of approaching the remote work from home, to avoid, for instance, being told to pay rent for the employee at home. So that works with the policies and how you draft them. And of course, we cannot finalize from here the discussion. As Signam, we've started this discussion, and we must engage with different players, the Ministry of Labour, the Industrial Court, and the Labour officers, to ensure that the new or novel disputes that arise are well handled without exposing organizations or businesses to huge financial liabilities. I thank you for listening.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Patson Arinitwe. And just before we do get our closing remarks from Mr. Alex Matovu, who has also been heading the organization of this e-conference, we want to thank everyone who has participated, and special thanks to Signam Advocates, partnering with NBS Television, and of course powered by Liquid Telecom. But in studio now, we do have the organizing chairperson himself, Mr. Alex Matovu, who is also a partner with Signam Advocates. What do you make of the discussion so far? I'm saying so far because it's ending on air live here on television and all the other social media platforms, but it's continuing in the discussions.
Yes. I think that for me, what is really, really important is that we've had our viewers participate. We've had our viewers throw in so many questions.
And we haven't answered so many.
Yeah, many of them are still coming to me. But I think it just shows how interested, how proactive Ugandans are. I like the fact that we've not folded our hands to say, like I mentioned at the beginning, government yet Yambe. But I think that we are all considering this as something that we must take upon ourselves. I also like the fact that when the speakers were speaking, none of them seemed to have, have it all. I think it was Francis who mentioned that none of us was prepared for this. So the fact that we are all not prepared, then coming together is the best thing for us to do. Someone said if you want to go fast, you can go alone. But if you want to go far, it's important that you go together or you go with others. And I think that the discussion for me has just proved that there's not going to be a solution from one person or one entity. It's going to require us working together. Employers, employees, government and the private sector, to see that we actually overcome this, which I actually know we shall.
Dear viewer, thank you very much for being part of this conference. Thank you to Alex Matovu, who led the team that was organizing, but all our panelists that you have heard from. Thank you very much for all your contributions to this discussion. We request all panelists to continue following the hashtag, because people are still asking questions, and it's important that we respond to them. Mildred, it's been such a pleasure.
It has. It's been a pleasure, but maybe before we throw in the compliments, I want to ask Mr. Alex Matovu, in case one wants to get in touch with Signam Advocates, how do they do that, apart from getting you on social media right now?
Okay, I think that, of course, first of all, our website is available, www.signamadvocates.com. We are very much available there. We are available on all social media platforms, and we are quite interactive. Our firm is about innovation, relationship, innovation, trust. That's what we are about.
Yeah.
So even doing this for us is not a coincidence. It's just the way we do what we do. So we think that it's just the beginning, and I like what you mentioned, it's just the beginning to a long journey that we shall have together. Maybe we have not been coming out this public, but we feel that as lawyers, we are not separate from what society is. We don't work in a vacuum. So it's important that we work together, be available. You know, this is a social media generation. It's a .com era, like we like to say. So we feel that that availability is there, you know, in the legal profession. Not just us, but we feel that all lawyers, really, we should all advance to see that we serve society better. Yeah.
As a learned friend, like you've
Yes.
always been called,
Yes.
what advice do you give both to employees
Yeah.
and to the employers? Because all that we've been discussing about is the reality on ground. And even after we've talked about some of these issues, some of them may be happening.
Yes.
Even after this.
Yeah.
What sort of advice would you give to both sides?
Yeah, I think that Dennis used 3 words, the tripartite, I would call it, reflect, reload, and relaunch. It's important to not just think about this in relation to businesses, but also at an individual level. I'm delivering different talks in different areas. I'm saying we ought to reinvent ourselves. I like what Liquid mentions, for example, and says we've been a telecom company. We are moving to technology. We must advance. We must reinvent ourselves. Surprisingly, the things we're talking about here have happened in many other countries. Florence mentioned to you that for her there was nothing new. Microsoft Teams and all these products that they keep using for meetings and appraisals have been happening elsewhere. So I think that we all knew this would come. It's just that it has been pushed by something, you know, that no one envisaged. But it should be good. It should be something good that comes out of something that we would imagine as bad.
Yeah.
So I feel that we all need to work together, collaborate as much as possible, not leave the solution to one entity, but also hold each other accountable. You know, we've talked about issues to do with internet costs and access and all that, availability of internet. If government needs to play a part, we must hold them accountable, but we must also be willing to do what we have to do at an individual level. Looking at issues like our financials level, I've been telling people that today, if you're terminated, the best thing may not be to look for another job. Why? Because the factors or the reasons why you've been terminated in one place are the same reason elsewhere. So you must reinvent. You must think differently. You must be able to start up a business. We are known as an entrepreneurial country. Now more than ever before, should our entrepreneurial adrenaline, so to say, come out so that we can, you know, advance.
I totally agree with you. I mean, that means if you're going to go looking for another job, it will be just part of your life. Gabriel, it's been more than a pleasure.
We could go on and on, but we've got to end it here. But remember, the conversation continues on social media. So link up with NBS social media pages, the ones of Signum, and remember to use the hashtag LabourCon2020.
And as we go out, we should not forget that this conversation did come in this way because of COVID-19, and therefore we need to go ahead and follow the guidelines that have been given. Use your mask as long as you are going to get into a public place. Make sure that you wash your hands as often as possible with soap and water at that, and also social distancing is very key. And I know as we are going, I can see Alex is already wearing his mask. I'll be getting mine on. Gabriel should be getting his from wherever he did leave it. But thank you so much for being a part of us, and to Signum Advocates, to Liquid Telecom and NBS Television. It's been a great time with you. Let's continue the discussion online. From Gabriel Iguma and myself, Mildred Tuhaise, a very good evening to you.
When pandemics strike, it's rarely business as usual. They shake our world, alter our thinking, and disrupt routines and established processes. What is the future of work past COVID-19? How should regulators, employers, and courts manage the disruptions related to employment relations as we know them? Join Signum Advocates as it hosts the second annual Labour and Employment Conference, televised live on NBS TV on the 31st of May 2020 between 2 to 4 p.m. under the theme Business and Employment Sustainability Amidst the COVID-19 Crisis. Proudly sponsored by Liquid Telecom, building Africa's digital future.
NBS. Always.
As you know, we are going to be using these masks until COVID is gone. Before you put it on, make sure that your hands are clean. Wash your hands with soap and water. If you are in a place that you do not have soap and water, ensure that your hands are sanitized. You make sure that you cover the mouth and the nose. You make sure that the loops cover the ears. Make sure that it covers your cheek and it covers your upper part of the nose. If you want to adjust